like what is a formal definition for a good auction mechanism, and like how do we compare various mechanisms. I guess the emphasis was on good, but like not in the ethical sense necessarily, although I do think like when you're coming up with the formal definition for like what properties do you want, there's like some notion of that. Like, for example, like, the revelation principle or something. Like, there's always some reason that you want such a property. So I think it's mostly on the like formal CS. And as Alex says, maybe there's a few metrics that like we know what's bad in existing systems, so that might be a starting point. But yeah, I kind of originally intended that as a definition question of like how do we define good in this context.
I see. Yeah, I understand. No, my comment. So then my main comment there would be that I see two big aspects to the question, and I haven't passed through all the little items there, but so one aspect to me is about again measuring what's going on essentially, and then there's another one that's more related to other issues. I think we're on the repository, which is, sorry, let me check so I don't. There were some of the other, sorry, not the issues anymore, but the research proposals. Let me check. So there were some on not the Flashbot design. Sorry. Yeah, the survey of the existing auction literature, right? That I think Surya was in charge of. So I think this is a bit. So in order to tackle the good question, like in terms of like how good of a mechanism it is, I think that's highly dependent on this other question, like surveying what possibilities are out there before we can say something meaningful. So my main comment in that, I think the component of understanding what's going on is fairly standalone, and the infrastructure is there with MEV inspect, and that can be quantified, like separated into smaller questions. That has been done already in the issue. The main other comment I have there is I feel this issue is very much correlated with an understanding of the literature of auctions and mechanisms for doing this. So we have a universe or a space to compare this to other things, right?
Yeah, exactly. It's like I thought
that makes sense.
Same
so
thing.
Then,
yeah. So
yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
all right. So go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Okay, so yeah, so like that was also something I wanted to point out as well, where I think that there's a lot more to surveying auctions than just sort of in theory, right? And so part of that comes along with trying to evaluate what kind of adversaries we're dealing with, like what adversarial model should we make. So like I think all those questions are wrapped into how do you define an auction mechanism that works and is good. And so I think without first defining how we're going to say good, it's hard to then choose one auction mechanism until we have define our adversary, and in that context what is good.
Yeah, that makes sense. So I think to me it sounds like you guys should maybe talk on Discord async, because that does make sense that some understanding could be one way to approach the definition of what good is. So maybe a first pass could be, even before we do like a full survey, just identifying what various like adversary to definition mappings people have explored in the past are, and maybe that could be something that's like in between the survey and this question, or it could be a starting point that either issue owner kind of takes.
Yeah, absolutely, that makes sense. Yeah, I think that's the only comment that I have. Another comment more of a practical nature, that I'm humbled that you tagged me for tackling this. I think I would really enjoy doing this, but I will be taking time off during December, which and quite a bit of time off. So I might be off for a month or more. So I don't know if that fits the. We can talk about this later, but I don't know that fits the agenda really. So perhaps it's like I feel December is going to be a very active month for kickstarting this, and I'll be mostly offline. So that can be a problem. So perhaps I should take a more side role where I can take some of the things later down the line, but I'm not sure I'm the best person given that to coordinate this question. I don't know. We can talk about that later, but I did want to mention it just because if we consider consolidating this plan, I think perhaps I shouldn't take this role right now.
Yeah, that all makes sense. I think it's best to coordinate with Tina and Alex, I guess, especially if anyone else has those kinds of concerns. I would say that from my perspective, like it's that like we have more of a long-term interest than a short-term interest. So I think what we care more about is like long-term, having the right people working on things they are motivated to work on in the problem space and be like enabled to do that in an effective way. So I think December, like we plan on in many ways, like formalizing some of these questions into more public digestible documents and maybe starting to have some idea of how we want to approach them. But I don't think we'll like this is probably going to be a many year like scale of research effort if we're going to answer these questions like conclusively and if it kind of follows through to the end. So like longer term, that's probably more important.
Awesome. Yeah, I think for with regard to Alejo, your specific availability problem, because we chatted about this before, the reason why I think it's not big of an issue for the immediate paper, because first of all, the papers have a specific timeline associated with it, but the papers at the beginning of our research process, right? So like essentially the papers should actually be working coordinating with the rest of our Flashbots contributor who's actually collecting the data on the inspector side to actually be able to answer some of the questions already. So like I think the paper what we should do is actually scope out before you go on vacation is really to scope them out so that the remainder of the inspector team can actually map their map onto this. So that's kind of like why I mentioned it. It's actually better front-loaded because defining these questions and refining the scope and actually sit down and answer exactly what we just discussed is more important. So that in fact it's not that Alejo, you are going to be delivering every single piece of artifact. No, this is the collaborative effort, and I think the role of a research fellow we want is to basically set the make sure it's not the high level direction, but in terms of structure, set the structure in place so that we could have our collective mapping on and contribute easily and effortlessly. And when you come back from the vacation, I think a lot of the things should be there if we actually set the motion in progress. That's what I meant. But of course, it's idealistic. So like, welcome. We should definitely chat more about how this could play into your schedule.
Great, sounds good. Yeah.
So before we like keep going, do you guys, anyone else here, have questions or things that aren't clear or concerns on what has been like discussed so far and like the structure of the research effort? All right.
I think we should continue with also diving, because having heard from Surya, and in fact, I think everyone here is paper 1 folks, because paper 2 folks somehow are all on vacation this week. For example, Austin and a couple other folks. So and also like I think quite a few of the paper 2 questions we had interest expressed from the paradigm folks. So Dan was actually probably more relevant to the second question than second paper than paper 1. But here's Dan. Dan is back. Hey, Dan. Dan, I saw you unmuted yourself. Well, I guess Dan muted himself again. We can see you. We just can't hear you. Well, okay. Yeah, looks like, Dan, your mic is not quite working, but speak up whenever your mic is working or type in.
Sorry about that.
Chat. Oh, great.
Hi, sorry. Didn't mean to be disruptive. Had to drop for a second.
Oh, not a problem at all. I think we have come to like I think that once again, like most of the folks here on the current call are interested in jamming and contributing to paper 1, whereas paper 2, where community and like the ethical chapter has a lot more to do with. I think both. I think Charlie said him and Giorgio's are definitely into kind of answering some of the paper 2 questions. We also have Austin Williams, who will join us next week after he come back from vacation for paper 2 discussion as well. But I think like kind of just in general, like kind of, Jen, how do you see yourself being involved in the research process, and do you see yourself taking on a research question, or more as a chipping in when necessary? Because there are a lot of questions here. You can see from the, yeah.
Yeah. So I think I'm mostly, the question I'm personally most interested in is about sort of like malicious versus benign MEV. So I'm not sure if that falls under the should we allow any MEV on the system, or what that is exactly. Yeah. And basically the question is like detecting one or the other, how to distinguish them. But in general, I mean, I think Charlie's sort of going to take the lead on the research stuff from our side. So I was planning to mostly just help him and Giorgio's with whatever they decide to look at.
Yeah, I think
have them take the lead on that.
Yeah, that would be actually, I think that's one of the probably most challenging question on paper 2, and also most interested question. In fact, we have so many research fellows all express that whether they are the research fellow for this question, they would like to contribute to this part of the question or have a say in it. So it'll be quite interesting of a process. Cool. Oh, okay. So before we jump to, can we go back to paper 1? So Alex, would you mind? Well, actually, let me. If everyone just, Alex, can you click on the PDF file that I shared with the mind map? Because I think it may be easier, shorter to kind of look at. Yeah, but you have to zoom in a little bit. Sorry about that. Yeah. So, with regard to paper 1. We covered Alejo's part, and kind of like I think there's more things to be figured out there. I think Surya, you mentioned here and there, but I want to hear more about what's your approach in terms of how comfortable you are in kind of handling these questions. What are your thoughts and plans in terms of going forward next step?
Right. So I think the actual survey part is like probably quite simple in terms of just sort of creating a taxonomy for all the sort of auction mechanisms out there. I think the more challenging question really is, once we have this taxonomy, how do we choose which one to go by? And so I think so the actual like auction survey part, I think, is quite simple. But I think the other question of first defining good and bad for MEV, and then in the context of that, only then can we actually see evaluate the different types of auctions. So my plan going forward is essentially in the next what's the date today? Today's the 19th, right? So my goal is in the next 2, maybe 3 weeks have some sort of a taxonomy created for the auction mechanisms that I've looked at so far. I'm hoping in that time that at least through Discord or something, asynchronously, I can talk more with either Alejo, as long as he is around, or somebody else who's interested in sort of talking more about the other question about defining a good auction or good MEV extraction. And so I think that'll be my main approach for the next about 2 weeks, probably.
Cool. So, well, that's actually good. I think that it works out well with our timeline. I think what we in the parallel are planning to do, and we also shared a bit with you, is that we want to, because the moment we post our ETH research post, which is Monday, the release day is Monday, regardless what happens, lightning, whatever, thunderstorms, the world come down. No, we're gonna launch on Monday. So that said, we actually have a call to action on our research, ETH research post and Medium post for people who are interested in contributing to answer GitHub issues. So I think one of the things also will be great too, as you are thinking about these questions, add more GitHub issues, but not too many, don't spam the issues, but we want to use Git issues as ways that you can write out questions in your mind that you would like to jam more with, the community. You see what I mean?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, so flash out, right now GitHub issue 7 has 3 different breakdowns. I think I would suggest personally us using the GitHub issues as one question per issue, sorry, not one research question, but one sub question that, for example, and be very specific, add auctions, other priority auctions, kind of be more specific with the ask so that people can actually answer these questions and it provokes answers. So come up with good questions that feeds into each of the sub questions that you want to do. And also what you mentioned, the taxonomy part, I think would be great to actually follow the format of, so Alex shared a little bit on our GitHub. We want to follow the EIP process, but it's really about the EIP kind of a template, because we like how clear it is in terms of outlining what you're trying to say. So kind of think about writing your outline, but in a proposal format. And that way, all the issues can all link back to the proposal in the markdown. So that's kind of the simplest, I think, way for the public community, with technical community, to be able to contribute to these research questions. But they're nice to have. I would say that I think mostly a lot of these research will be dependent on the research fellows' independent thinking and discussions with other research fellow. But you leverage GitHub as a forum, I think.
Yeah, I will for sure.
Yeah,
Tina,
that's the.
Tina, I want to comment on the issues that I had noted. I think they would benefit from some connection, some more explicit connection with the different research proposals. So right now, again, some overlap directly because the title is the same, but there's no explicit mention in the issues as of to which proposals they're related. And perhaps it's hard to enforce that if we're going to have people opening issues freely. But I think it would be useful to have some form of mapping from one to the other, so that's a little bit more organized for a newcomer. So for at least the ones we open and we know that are related to the different proposals.
I agree. I think that's why we're having this call right now before we actually go to the public, so that Alex, and I can work with you guys in kind of refining the questions and linking them back to the RFPs, and kind of draft a couple dummy not RFPs, sorry, Flashbots proposals, research proposals, and so that kind of we'll probably DM you guys async and before this weekend, kind of draft an outline to kind of in your mind how you want to approach these questions. At least we have a couple ones out there that could actually help the general public better understand what is our approach in examining these questions. Once again, the research question number 1 is very well specified. Question 2 is a bit underspecified, but it's still kind of pretty well written. and so like and I think us over the next, so then like already we should establish the connection and flash out the question a little bit more and with Surya kind of have like an outline in terms of like the taxonomy you're talking about in your mind, kind of, yeah, the process. So yeah, well, that's good. And what about, let's go to the third one. Sunny has very strong opinions.
Sorry, before we jump to the third one, can I a quick comment? So sorry, I'll be happy to talk to you about these different mechanisms. We can iterate on that. I'll still have a couple of weeks before I leave, so happy to do that. So perhaps one question on terminology. Maybe the meaning we want for good in these first questions is more about efficiency, right? How can we build an efficient auction mechanism? I mean to distinguish it from good in terms of like an ethical good, where we want like MEV extraction that's not harmful or that's not, I don't know, bad in some like ethical terms, which is the aim of like paper 2, and it's a much more nuanced question. So I think the efficient thing will give us like a much more operational criterion to work with. But I don't know, Phil, if like is this notion of efficiency you had in mind with the good or there?
I think that's one key aspect. I think for sure, like it's valid to say something that's good should be efficient. Then must understand what efficient means to understand good, and like then you kind of have a more specific maybe issue of like what is an efficient auction mechanism, and it references like the what is the good auction mechanism. Then there's like an open question of, is there something that is good that like in maybe conflict with being efficient? Like maybe there's a fundamental like impossibility between like balancing efficient for miners and traders, or once that actually is specified out, or in having both efficiency for miners and traders and keeping the gas low or something like that. I don't know. But there might be more to being good than just efficiency, but I think that's for sure part of it and required. And I think in general, like my vision was that from these issues, we would create more issues. So I think that's like a natural example of how we can refine that. And maybe it turns out that good and efficient are the same thing, and then we kind of merge those into one issue. But I think having that as a downstream question is one way to start specifying it. And like, we probably won't be able to answer any of these top level questions anytime soon. They'll just keep generating more questions for now. And one of the things I maybe proposed before as like a shower idea is it might even be cool if we have like a graphical explorer of like the dependency graphs of all our GitHub issues, because I think the goal that we want to set up is to generate more questions from every question we answer also. So
makes sense.
That's my
Thanks.
Yeah, no problem. Yeah, so I intend it to be very open-ended. If you think efficiency is a good thing to study, then absolutely, I think that's good. It makes sense to break that off for sure.
Cool. Well, Sunny, are you there? We'd like to move on to the third research question.
I'm here.
Yeah. So Sunny and Dave, I think they were already independent of Flashbots, considering doing a survey paper on essentially MEV across different architecture. So can you? Wait, so are we still sharing screen? Sorry, I lost the. Can you still see the? Yeah. So currently, this is what we have discussed in the past, but this is a question that has been slightly under specified. Yet this is more of a downstream question as well, because it's answerable or from a survey approach. So what are your thoughts on taking question number 3? What do you think you may approach it? How do you think you may approach it?
Well, so what we're working on is not so much about survey paper across different architectures. It is more of what are the different formats that, like, what are the different, figuring out what sort of information is needed by someone in order to extract MEV, and then design an architecture to hide as much of that information as possible. So I'm
Right.
not sure
I understand that project. I meant in terms of like this question. So then I guess the key is to identify the overlapping and to see whether this question you think is interesting for SICA to take on the research fellowship. I guess that's the question. Sorry if wasn't clear.
I see. I'd say that like most of the I don't know. The problem with this question is I really don't see much big differences between the architecture, like what MEV would look like in like most proof of work and proof of stake architectures. I think as long as you have a proposer who proposes the blocks, I think like it ends up being the same. I guess really the only place that really matters is like leaderless protocols, such as like Avalanche style stuff. And yeah, I guess, I think that's an interesting question. And I haven't really thought too much about it yet, but as far as I can tell, proof of work and proof of stake systems should not be that different. So like with the vote, and same with the transaction ordering system. Like I feel like the consensus protocol and stuff is like not what's relevant here. It's like, I think really this should just be redesigned for a question of like, leader versus leaderless.
Yeah, I think that's fair. And I think,
Phil, any comments on that?
yeah, I think that's definitely a good way to clarify that question. I think the other related thing that I wanted to maybe discuss there is, besides leader versus leaderless, which I think is one of the main things for sure, but also like maybe the impact of finality and like in practice, how does that make a difference? And I don't know if that's something we can just point out and like kind of talk about at a high level, or if we can say something more precise, because it kind of seems like finality is like almost like some sort of like, defense against long-term reversions. I don't think it affects short-term MEV. I think we can like kind of make that case, but like long-term MEV probably will be affected, but also there's a game theory in POW that makes like long-term MEV of like large reorgs probably unlikely, just because people don't like accept large reorgs as legitimate in general. So yeah, maybe just something I wanted to touch on in addition, but I think definitely also leader versus leaderless is going to be really important to pin down, especially because I know for a fact when I talked to Goon about MEV like 2 years ago, he was like, oh, Avalanche solves this completely, it's leaderless, so no issues. And I don't think that position is like written down anywhere, nor is it the position of most people at Ava. So I'm not trying to like forward it as like a straw man, but I will say that like I think it will be important. People will say that like, oh, doesn't leaderless, like if there's no leader, there's no problem. And I do think that there's a lot to say about like what the process looks like and how to design a good process in that context.
Yeah. Maybe rephrase it as Nakamoto versus BFT versus Avalanche. And those three classes. Like there might be like other consensus protocols as well, but maybe by restricting it to only those three classes that makes it easier to compare.
Yeah, I think that's reasonable. And probably a lot of the Nakamoto and BFT style will be the same if it's leader based BFT.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, sorry, go ahead, Alex. I think Alex is about to say what I'm going to propose is that I think it's actually good to hear what everyone's actual breakdowns and like kind of thinking on your feet, like kind of if you were to take on the question, how you would frame the question and approach it. I think the next step after this call, what we'll do is that Alex and I will ping each of you and share with you the exact link to the FRP, and kind of perhaps you can take some time and articulate in terms of if this were an answerable question, how would you answer it? But however, the FRP format is very much I would say up in the air and open for, like, you could just revise it to as you see fit, because I don't think we have a perfect template for it. But if anyone has a good template for this, we're very happy. I think that the key there is that this is a document that is supposed to be a living document and working doc, and is when that is such that it's clear enough that it structures the questions and break it down and your approaches and what needs to be done there in a more elaborate fashion, like a one-pager. That until the essentially the drafts is complete, or the artifacts are collected, the first, like, this will be the living document that actually feed into I think, Phil, you mentioned you would like to put things together, starting to do and focus on doing that in mid-December. So essentially, I think the RFPs should be pretty much fleshed out, not just questions, but also some of the answers and approaches. Of course, it will be continue going, but like, so that it would, I would hope that whatever we produce, like, this will be one, like, succinct summary on where things are, and can be index a lot of the artifacts that it or reference a lot of artifacts that's being produced along the way, so that when you put things together, like, it will be also easy for you to put it together. But I don't know how exactly we can make this as easy as possible for the research fellows and for the community at large to understand without misinterpretation. What are these questions and how to answer and participate in them, yet produce stuff that we could use and put together. Phil, do you have any suggestions? What do you think about the idea of using these FRPs, these templates, for the formulation of questions and for the outlining of approaches, and for the essentially flashing it up and become a standalone piece that can be put together?
Yeah.
Sorry.
Go ahead, Alejo, sorry.
No, just one quick comment. I think that's a great idea. The only comment would be to make sure I think it would be good to distinguish the questions from the answers. So not use this space to answer the questions, but have the proposals be just proposals, and then have a different separate space for the actual work. And that might depend, like the format might be on GitHub, or it might be elsewhere, depending on the different questions. But I guess what I'm going at is that I think there should be, like, this should sort of consolidate with the questions, and then the work they should sort of freeze, and then the actual work in solving them, perhaps it would be better to have it elsewhere.
I think that's practical. What would you suggest that elsewhere? And the reason why, once again, we went back to GitHub has more to do with the fact that we actually want to weed out the non-technical contributors, at the beginning, like, not weed out them completely. Like, if you don't take the effort of actually, watching the GitHub and repo, and actually don't take the effort of actually, like, read and look at the MD and comment on the issues, I think people are probably, just not investing sufficient thoughts and interest in it. That's why we want to really use the GitHub issue to engage the community. And also, there's one single place. We don't want to have too many different separate sites for this. But I do agree that some of the answers are either going to be, for example, paper 1, research question number 1, it will be a lot of what Scott Bigelow has been working on with the MEP inspector team, that could actually is already live on GitHub and is open source. So that should be referenced. But I see, like, I guess Surya and Sunny, it needs to be like, if the answer lives somewhere else, what would be the most comfortable way for you to collaborate? Like, kind of, if we use our FRP as the questions, like flashed out thoughts, proposals of how to answer these questions, then where do the answers lie?
Yeah, it can be GitHub as well. I don't have no strong feelings for platform. I think each sub team perhaps will find a better place, and then we can maybe consolidate. I don't know if it had an idea for this, but maybe another repo for the paper or something like that. I'm sort of platform agnostic. I think the GitHub thing out weeding out non-technical people might make sense. What I'm just saying is, like, I think there would be a benefit from separating the question from the answer, because otherwise, if you start like mutating the questions into answers in the same document, we might lose track of what we were striving to answer in the first place. But GitHub, it's fine.
Yeah, but I do understand it probably poses a lot of like, we can also link it to Google Doc that you, because I know some of you guys prefer much better to work on Google Docs, which is definitely easier for a collaboration. Like we could have these RFPs post and freeze there, and issues referring to them, and discussions for reference, but then the living doc for like kind of the answers would probably be somewhere else. It could also be on your blog, like, because I think it doesn't really matter where it is, and we credit all of the research fellows and people who contribute regardless. So whose contribution charts and graphs and data gets used. So yeah. Okay, so I think that's, I guess we don't have, we will go into a deeper dive into paper 2, similar to the format today, with the folks who come back from vacation next week, before Thanksgiving. But aside from that, I think there's a lot to do. To sum it up, it seems that we need to work with each prospect research fellows on refining the FRP. We need to ask the research fellows to actually refine our FRP, in fact, but we will work with you to help see what is the best way to do it. And second is to refine the GitHub issues with also research fellows, so that the GitHub issues are answerable, because a lot of them may not necessarily have GitHub issues, but they also may not necessarily need to have GitHub issues. For example, once again, I think research fellows should create GitHub issues for that's associated with your FRP in particular. So that's basically it. And the timeline, I also shared in the Discord channel, the estimated timeline that we hope we will freeze the FRP. We hope to freeze the FRP, I guess, then before we, I wouldn't say freeze, I would say that we'll have a relatively finalized FRP draft for these questions flashed out by this weekend, so that when we open source on Monday, everything will be very clear and without confusion, and the research questions also to be polished before the end of the weekend. Second deadline is a timeline in terms of, and also works with a lot of people's vacation schedule, is December 16. Is it 16 or 15 or 17? I forgot. I shared it in the research Discord channel, that we would like to have the first draft of the answers, I would say, done, so that then Phil can go ahead and actually put together these pieces into potentially an outline and draft for paper 1, and see what we're missing from there. So those are essentially for December, and I think Phil should probably by early January will have a relatively more or less complete draft, but then at the same time paying the research fellows for kind of things that are missing. Would that work, Phil?
Yeah, that works for me.
Would that work for Alejo and Surya? I think the timeline is relatively compact, but I think, yeah, let me know if it works.
Yep.
I think that's okay. I think doable.
That's great. And lastly, I think Alex had raised a couple of questions about in our research papers. There's no mentioning of economics research and governance. And also I kind of identified that in our current research roadmap, there's no mentioning of any specific transaction encryption, including SGX related research. So my question is, do we consider those items within the scope of the research at this phase? So this is the question.
Can you say that again, actually?
Sorry, can you hear me?
Can you say that again, I said?
Oh, okay. Sorry, my bad. I may be breaking off. So, two questions, two topics are not covered in the research roadmap for paper 1 and paper 2, because they don't really fit there. But we think maybe necessary for us to get some sense. One is economics and governance. So governance, I think we can set aside because that has to do with some of the paper 2 questions. But in terms of the profit distribution that has been between the miners and the searchers or ecosystem holders, like that is an area of research that should probably start at some point. But the question is, when does it start? Should it be in this phase, or should it be after we produce paper 1 and 2 to be a subject? If it's in this phase, it could be also independent as a research topic. That's independent paper 1 and paper 2. So basically, economics and governance is not included in the current research roadmap.
I think that falls under what's a good mechanism. I mean, if it needs economics, then what are good economics is part of that. And if it needs governance, then, what is good governance is part of that. I think that also falls into paper 2. So, if we want to specify those more clearly, Tina, you can feel free to also add issues, I think. And I think those are valid. Other SGX and other methods of encryption, I also think falls under a good, efficient mechanism. Like if it needs privacy, then what is the best technical way to accomplish that privacy? I think is a logical follow-up. So maybe the question is too vague, but I think those are all valid refinements of that question. And as for timeline, I don't really have a strong preference. I think it depends when we find people who want to own that, and also when the engineering side needs things to happen by.
Yeah. Okay. I think the within the Flashbots timeline, I do think that economics question may need to be front loaded a little bit, so that at least there is something that the engineering side can benchmark to, or can provide artifacts that actually would answer some of the hypotheses on this. But let me think about it. So because the first question, good mechanism, let me discuss with Alejo. Alejo, if you have any thoughts on the economics question being part of what is a good auction mechanism. Also, I think Stefan, who's not on this call, he mentioned that he's actually interested in seeing the auction survey and auction section, because his opinion is that the auction mechanism will answer the other half of the economics question, that at least more practically from an engineering perspective that they need input from. So I think Alejo and Sarah, anything on this, because this is not really within the scope currently.
Yeah, no, but I agree with what Phil said. I think we have to at least tangentially think about these questions when thinking out what a good auction mechanism is, right? So we will at least think a little bit about these things, and then we can probably define the question a little bit better.
Cool. And Sarah, anything from your side that you think may be relevant to the added on economics?
I don't know. not that comes to mind at the moment.
Cool. Awesome. I think this is really productive. I think we have a next step to do, a lot to do, but anyone has any questions? Phil, I can see your face.
Yeah, thanks for taking the time, everyone.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah. Oh, and Phil, did you get to discuss with Vitalik a bit about our research, of our work?
Yeah, I'll post in Discord in a bit. We'll talk about it.
Okay.
He's pretty excited, I think. So that's good.
Oh, that's interesting. That's awesome to hear. Mm-hmm.
Awesome. Hey Phil, when are we getting your paper? When is it out?
I don't know.
Dude.
Can we accelerate your publishing process? Can we do anything to accelerate it? We're going to write a
Nothing that
medium.
you'd want to do, let's put it that way.
What is the
hopefully next week. I'm hoping next week, but we're just running the final experiments now, and it's just a matter of getting everyone happy with the result. Really.
Yeah. Oh, Alejo, I'm so sorry. I ghosted you on sending you the super secret draft of Phil's. Alejo really wants to read the paper 3. I forgot. I'll send it.
Yeah, feel free to read the super secret draft. Just don't share it or anything like that. That would be cool because it's not all my work. So I would feel bad if the co-authors got screwed. But just read it and enjoy. And but hopefully the experiments will be much better in the final version. I will say that disclaimer that the super secret draft has a very limited, crappy set of experiments that were done on a deadline that we decided not to meet at the end of it. So
awesome. Will do. Thanks.
Perfection here. Yep. Awesome. Thanks, guys.
Cool. Yeah. Thanks so much, guys. See you soon.
Have a good one.
Have a good one.
Thanks. You guys too.